So my role today, I serve as Vice President and Head of Investor Relations for Starbucks, which a company most people hopefully have heard of.
I would be surprised if someone hadn't heard of Starbucks at this point in the game.
Yes, we're almost like a household name. That's a good thing. But my journey before being at Starbucks, I actually started in Big Four. So I'm a CPA by background. And I did about 7.5, 8 years in Big Four at PwC and Ernst & Young. And that's where I really started to see a diverse slate of clients and industries, and it really excited me. And so after doing Big Four for 7.5, 8 years, I then moved over to industry at Time Warner and spent half of my time in the internal audit function and the other half in consulting.
Oh, interesting. So you were doing internal audit, but then also consulting.
I did. So it was all with Time Warner. And so they had an internal consulting group. And so spent half of my time in audit. And then I was asked to go over to the consulting group. And it was actually initially just a 1-year project where I was supposed to help set up a center of excellence for the accounting function. And that 1 year turned into 5 years in consulting. And so after I spent about 10 years in total at Time Warner, I migrated over to the fintech space, still in internal audit, and it was at Fiserv. And so did a really good job at Fiserv, and there was so much opportunity, and the company was so great at career development that from internal audit, I then did strategy and operations for the CFO, and ultimately was tapped to head investor relations. And so did that role, and in doing that role, oversaw a number of mergers and acquisitions, including our acquisition of First Data. And after that restructuring, I moved over to a company called Ingredion. They're a supplier for Starbucks, and stayed there as head of investor relations and corporate communications officer. And then Starbucks called. And I say, when Starbucks calls, you answer. And so from there, the rest is history, at least for now.
Yeah, that's really, really exciting. Okay, so I want to hone in on a couple pieces here.
Yes.
So you started off in kind of accounting, audit, and then you pivoted into consulting. Is that a common transition, or was there something around that was a little bit unique in your journey?
It's not common at all.
Okay.
And I always tell people, being in kind of the CPA accounting arena, you are almost trained to think black and white, especially as an auditor, if you will.
Yeah.
And being in consulting, you have to be able to navigate through gray and navigate through ambiguity. And so usually the two are not in one person's career profile. But what happened for me was I did, such a good job in being in the audit function, but also being a partner. So not necessarily being corporate police, but really building relationships. And that's how then I got tapped on the shoulder to have interest in going into consulting. And so it was more of, hey, not only do you know this space as we set up this shared service, but you know controls, you know kind of risk management, but you're also really good at building relationships. And so that's how that opportunity came to me to go into that group for 1 year.
Yeah, so that's, because now that you say it, it makes total sense to me. Auditing is kind of a retrospective. You're looking back on time. Okay, let's make sure everything's where it should be. And that's an important function. And the consulting's more forward-looking.
Yes.
That's what's possible, where can we go, which is kind of two different mindsets.
Exactly.
But I love that the pivot, why people really saw you being able to make that move, was your relationship building skills, your ability to partner and advise and influence.
So it really wasn't about the technical skills at that point. It was all about the soft skills. And that's what was portable.
Okay, so then we're in consulting and we're doing some of this for a while, and then all of a sudden someone taps you and says, hey, investor relations would be interesting. I would imagine that's not a common transition.
Yeah.
So what was it in your background or in your persona, or maybe your passion and interest, which made that kind of door open?
Yeah, so I didn't have it on my radar. So the link between the two, so we met at our time at Emory University. When I went on to Fiserv, I then left the company and went to Wharton. And so in graduating from Wharton, I came back to Fiserv. So I moved to Philadelphia, came back to Atlanta, and I had a conversation with my CFO at the time. And I had said, hey, I'm back and I want to do more. And he was saying, Tiffany, you just got back, like get settled in. Well, then a week later, he called and said, hey, you said you wanted to do more. How about heading up investor relations? And so I didn't even have it on my radar. And I remember clearly saying, can I think about it? And he said, sure, I'll hold. And it was that quick that I got into investor relations. And so I think the idea behind investor relations at that time was you're mixing finance with communications. And so I had the finance background. I was previously Miss Black Georgia USA, and so I spent a year reigning for the state and representing the state. So that was the communications training. And so in essence, it was marrying those two. And who would have ever thought that that experience would parlay into a corporate America job? And so I think part of it also was my reputation of, if you give it to her, she'll figure it out. And so that's how I ended up in investor relations. It was just by luck and from someone trusting me, and for me raising my hand and constantly saying, I want to do more.